Okay, so I have a couple minutes after our hour. It's about 6:32 or 33, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Eric Davidson. I'm the director of the Appalachian Laboratory, and I'd like to welcome all of you to joining us at this Watershed Moment event. I want to first advise you that we are recording this event, and so that those who are unable to attend will be able to watch it later. And also, I want to mention that we are having another, before I introduce tonight's speaker, I want to also mention that we are having another event a week from today that will be at the same time, and through this virtual platform. And so our speaker next week is Dr. Rebecca Taylor, who is on the faculty of Frostburg State University, and she will be speaking on where the ticks are. So it should be, as we move into tick season, I think it's entirely appropriate that we have an expert on the topic telling us more about the biology of ticks and what we have to look out for. But tonight, it's my honor to introduce my colleague, Dr. Helen Bailey, who is from the Chesapeake Biological Laboratory, which is a sister laboratory of ours at the Appalachian Laboratory. We're both part of the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science. Helen has been there since about 2010. She, as you'll see, specializes in studying the movement of marine mammals, but she also studies sea turtles, and she has out a wonderful book for children about leatherback sea turtles. And if anybody's interested in that, they can get in touch with us. And I understand it's a little difficult to find at the moment, but we can figure out how to get that. I would warn you, however, that there's coincidentally, there's another author by the name of Helen Bailey from the UK who also writes children's books and who is deceased. So if you just Google Helen Bailey children's books, you'll probably get the wrong person. But I assure you that our Helen Bailey is alive and well, and she's going to be speaking with us tonight. She received her master's, or excuse me, she received her bachelor's degree in biological sciences from the University of Oxford in the UK, and her master's of science in oceanography from the University of Southampton, and her PhD from the University of Aberdeen for her work on the habitat use of bottlenose dolphins. And she's subsequently been studying underwater sound levels, environmental impacts of offshore wind turbines on marine mammals. She received a National Research Council postdoctoral award to study migration pathways and hotspots of marine predators at the National Oceanographic and Administration, NOAA, as part of the Census of Marine Life's Tagging of Pacific Predators project. And as I said, she joined us at the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science in 2010. And we're absolutely delighted to have her with us today. And so, Helen, I'm going to hand it over to you now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's great to be here, and thank you all for joining us this evening. I'm sorry I can't be here in person with you all. Usually my first question is, how many of you have seen dolphins in the Chesapeake Bay? And I don't know if any of you want to put a little hand up, put on your video, whatever you want to do. Let's see if we can do. I see that. Yeah, and I see someone with a great dolphin background. Yep, see another hand. Fantastic. Another one. Okay. Well, wow, that's brilliant. So you do believe me, there are dolphins in the Chesapeake Bay. Sometimes people are rather incredulous when I say that. And I think one of the things, hopefully, that I'm going to show you tonight is we've really changed the paradigm that dolphins are just very occasional visitors in the bay to they are regular inhabitants of the Chesapeake Bay. So I'm going to be talking tonight. First of all, I'll give a little background on bottlenose dolphins, what species they are, and who knows, does anyone want to say what kind of fish are they? Want to put it in the chat box? What kind of fish are bottlenose dolphins? No, I see shaking heads. Okay, you know already, they're mammals. They're mammals. Eric gave it away in the introduction. Okay, so we're going to be talking about the marine mammal species bottlenose dolphins. I'll give a little background to how this project got started. And then some of you may be aware that we have a website and mobile app called Chesapeake Dolphin Watch, where you can report sightings and you can see where people have been observing dolphins in the bay. So I'll give you a little tour of our app. And then I'll show you what we've been finding out from that information. And that really has been so crucial to our research to have this amazing network of observers across the entire bay to learn what the dolphins are doing and where they're going in the bay. And lastly, I'll talk about the work that we've been doing listening to dolphins. So we see the dolphins, but we can also listen to them and learn more about their groups, about their behavior and what they're doing from listening to their calls, from eavesdropping. Great. So, slide here. Now, just in case, I know we're all at home right now, so in case you get distracted, these are the take-home messages. So I'm giving you the cheat sheet up front. So some of the things that we've learned are that dolphins can occur year-round in the Chesapeake Bay, but mainly they're there from May to October. So mainly from that spring to autumn with a peak in the summer. One surprise to us is they're very widespread in the bay. When we started this project, we were wondering where are the hot spots going to be? And we found actually they go throughout the bay and its tributaries. And a recent study by one of my students has been relating that information to various environmental characteristics. About the water temperature, the salinity, the tidal phase, and looking at those relationships and finding that they are quite closely related to water temperature. When we have warmer water temperatures, there are more dolphins, which is probably related to the fact they're giving birth here, as well as to what their prey is doing and where they're finding fish. So I'm going to talk more about all of this, but that's the punchline up front. So just in case anyone has to leave early. So bottlenose dolphins are marine mammals. They breathe air, they give birth to live young, and they nurse their young. They can weigh from 300 to 1,400 pounds, which is a big range, but bottlenose dolphins occur globally, right from the north of Scotland down to the south of New Zealand. So they have a very wide distribution. And when they're in the colder waters, really far north and far south, then they tend to be bigger. So those larger sizes tend to be those dolphins at the extremes of their range, versus when they're in warmer water, they tend to be a bit smaller. Of course, when they're in cold water, they're really trying to keep that heat in their bodies. So they tend to have big bodies and smaller fins. So if I sneak in a picture of a Scottish dolphin, see if you can spot it. They're around 6 to 12 feet long. Sometimes that surprises people that they're that big, because often you're only seeing part of the dolphin. You're just seeing the fin, but if you do happen to see one up close, if they do approach your boat, you'll probably realize that they are much bigger than they look. And again, those longer lengths tend to be in the extreme parts of their range versus the shorter lengths in the tropics. They eat a variety of fish and squid species. I can't tell you exactly what they're eating in the bay. It's difficult to pinpoint that. We obviously don't want to harm the animals in any way, and it can be difficult to observe, but we do know, based on the few studies that have been done along the mid-Atlantic, that they feed on a variety of species. They seem to be fairly opportunistic. They're commonly found in groups. Every now and again, you know, you'll see what looks like a lone dolphin, but a lot of the times they'll be in groups ranging from anything from 2 to 3 dolphins up to 20, or even more than 100. We were really shocked just how big the group sizes that were being seen in the bay. Usually they only form those larger groups offshore, and when they're in shallower, more coastal waters like the bay, we'd expect them to branch off into these smaller groups. But sometimes you'll see those smaller groups come together and get a sighting of a really large pod of dolphins. And because they are very social animals, they talk to each other. Just like we like to talk to each other, they talk to each other. So they're very vocal, and we have underwater microphones called hydrophones that allow us to listen to the calls that they're producing. Just a reminder, these animals are protected under the Marine Mammal Protection Act. So they should not be harassed. Please do not feed them, do not touch them, do not try to swim with them. They are wild animals, and do remember they have sharp teeth as well. So our project in the Bay actually began not with the focus on the Bay at all. I had got a research grant to study marine mammals offshore, off Ocean City, Maryland, in the Maryland wind energy area that some of you may have heard of, where they're proposing to put offshore wind turbines. And so we were doing that study using these underwater microphones, these hydrophones, to listen for the calls of whales, dolphins, and porpoises. But before we put them offshore, we wanted to test them first in the lab, and then we tested them off our pier. So the picture at the bottom is off the Chesapeake Biological Laboratory Pier, which is in the Patuxent River. And we put the hydrophones out to test them, make sure they were working properly. It started in summer 2015. And we realized, to our surprise, that we were detecting dolphins on the hydrophones fairly frequently. So we did it again in 2016. We wondered if 2015 had just been a blip, but no, we got more detections in 2016. So we've continued the monitoring in the Bay since then. And we were really excited to learn that dolphins were occurring in the Bay fairly regularly, but like a lot of research, finding that out then led to a lot more questions. So why were the dolphins coming in the Bay? Where were they going in the Bay? When were they coming into the Bay? And as much as I, with my background in acoustics, would like to answer those questions with these hydrophones, the hydrophones only have a detection range of about a mile. And so I would need an awful lot of these devices to cover the entire Bay. So instead we decided maybe we could have volunteers help provide us information on where they were seeing the dolphins. And that led us to develop this website in 2017, ChesapeakeDolphinWatch.org, where you could report your dolphin sightings. You could click on the map. You could record the date and time. So we had information that then popped up on that map in real time. And we had such success in 2017 that then in 2018, we converted it into a mobile app as well. So the QR code at the top is if you have an Android device, you can use that. Or if you have an iPhone, you can use the QR code on the bottom to get that Chesapeake Dolphin Watch app. So I'm just going to go through some of the steps. If you're not familiar with the app, we do have a tutorial video on our UMCES website, umces.edu/dolphinwatch. We do ask that everybody log in before that they enter, and that's purely because we are using this information for our research. So it's very important that if anyone reports a sighting, we are able to correspond with them via email just to confirm the information they've given us, find out if they can give us any additional information about their sighting that can contribute to the research. So you can create your own login, or you can log in using Facebook or Google. And once you do that, the first thing that you'll see, if this is your first time to the app, is a short bit of information about responsible viewing guidelines. Again, this is a protected species. So please don't feed with them, please don't try and swim with them. And one important bit of information is if you see a stranded animal, then these are the numbers to call in Maryland and Virginia. They have a phone line that's monitored 24/7. We do not have one that does that, so don't contact us if it's a stranded animal. Please contact the state agencies in Maryland and Virginia. And if you ever need to go back to this in the app, you just click the little binoculars icon. Once you've reviewed that, you'll go straight to the map, and you can use the filters in the top right-hand corner to decide, do you want to look at sightings for today, for the last 7 days, for the last month, or for previous years. So you can get an idea of where people were seeing dolphins. And if you do see a dolphin icon that has a little camera, then if you click on it, you'll be able to see the photo or video that was submitted along with that sighting report. So that can be fun to see people's photos. If you go on the app right now, there are some off Hooper's Island. And if you're following my mouse, off here, we've got some people have submitted photos there over the last month that you can take a peek at. But that can be fun to do. So even if you don't see dolphins yourself, you can still partake in the fun and see what dolphins are doing in the bay. If you do get lucky enough to see a dolphin, you can click on the map directly to where you saw the dolphin, or you can have it use your current location from your device, or perhaps if you're on a boat, you have a GPS, you can put in the latitude and longitude yourself. It will automatically populate with the current date and time, but you can adjust that if needed. You can use the slider for your group size estimate. And please, if you can, even if it's just a few words, put in a description, just so we know that, yes, you definitely saw, you're confident you saw dolphins and this is what you saw. It just helps us make sure people haven't put this information in by mistake. And then you can also click to upload any photos or videos you have. And if you initially enter it and then come back, you find, oh, I've got some great videos I want to upload, or I've got this additional information now, I've looked through my photos. You can always click the view my sightings in the top right corner and edit the information and add to the information that you put into your sighting report. And say all of that is very helpful for us as we do quality check every single report that we receive, which we receive about 1,000 sighting reports a year. So it is quite a lot, but we do quality check all of them before we put it into our final database that's used for our analysis and our scientific research. So a huge thank you to everyone who has contributed sighting reports, who's contributed photos and videos. I'm just showing a sampling here, but we were absolutely astounded. Dolphins are not easy to photograph. They move quickly and it's very easy to just get a splash or a tail end, but we've had some fantastic photos submitted, and we really appreciate all of you for sharing these photos with us. I'm going to show you a few videos because we've also seen some really interesting behavior through these videos. Initially, we didn't know if this was specifically a nursery area, if dolphins were giving birth or raising their young in the bay, but we now know that is the case. A live birth has been witnessed and we have regular reports of calves being seen and having photographs. This is one nice example because often a mother will get between her so that she's beside the boat rather than the calf. So often calves are hidden in the photographs. They might be behind the mother dolphin. But in this video, I'm going to show you, there's a nice little peek at a very young dolphin. So I'll start the video. And here, did you see the little dolphin? There it is. And I'm going to show it one more time. What is wonderful about watching these young calves is they haven't yet learned to surface elegantly like the adults do. So if you notice, the adults sort of come up, cruise along at the surface and then back down, whereas the young are like little corks. They're sort of popping up and going back down and popping up again as they haven't yet learned to control their speed. So I'll just show you that one more time. There's that little baby calf, and there it goes again. So that was wonderful to see a video of a calf. We also get some sightings where animals have come very close. I mean, you should not approach them closely, but sometimes they will approach you. And this was a kayaker. And when I play the video, listen carefully, I'll turn up my sound, but there's actually a whistle in the background. So I said, these dolphins are quite chatty. But it's all occurring underwater. And in this video, this was one of a few occasions where you can hear it in air. So I'll turn up my video, my sound here, and here we go. So there were a number of dolphins there. So some of these whistles are them talking to each other in a social interaction. They might also be talking to each other about what's this weird yellow thing on the surface. So yes, it was really fun to hear that. And I say those are the types of the sounds that we're recording underwater. This last video I'm going to show you was taken from a sailing boat. So I'll just look at here.
They're right under there. Look at him right here with us. He's right next to the boat. He's right there.
So that was one of the videos I can show you. Some of them we do have to turn off the audio because people get so excited. We get some colorful language. That one we were able to play you, but it is amazing to hear just how excited people are when they have these wonderful dolphin encounters right in our backyard in the Chesapeake Bay. So now I'm going to show you some of what are we doing with all this information. So it's all very good, nice photos, nice videos. But one of the first questions that we wanted to ask is, where were the dolphins occurring and when were they there? So I'm going to show you a video. This is from our first year of having the app, 2017, and we launched at the end of June. So this is going to show you the weekly confirmed sightings. So this is the quality check sightings from late June to the end of the year. So I'm going to show you a little video here, and you'll see how those blue dolphins move. These are the weekly sightings. So we saw a few different patterns there. As I say, one of the things that surprised me initially was just how widespread they were, that this isn't a localized, oh, they just go to one place in the bay. They are all over the place. And then also how that varied through the season. So here I'm showing maps, not just for 2017 now, but we've got 2017 on the left in purple. We've got 2018 in blue in the middle, and 2019 in orange on the right. So this is where we've taken our sightings and applied what we call a kernel density. So this is trying to show us where are the places that we're getting more concentrated sightings? Where are the highest densities of sightings? And we see it's relatively consistent across all 3 years. We have sort of up in the upper bay, we've got the middle bay around the Potomac, we've got down near the Rappahannock, and then down to the mouth. So they're really going throughout the main stem of the bay. We do see them go in most of the tributaries. We don't see them go really far up. So it does seem that they're still staying, they're not going all the way up into sort of the fresher water. They're staying more near the mouths, but they do go up the rivers to some extent, but definitely a lot of movement up and down that main stem of the bay. So here I've got some really new information. We finished analyzing our 2020 sightings. Of course, 2020 being a very unusual year, we were initially concerned with the recreational boating ban that we might not get many sightings reported at all. That then got lifted, and then we had lots of people out on boats on the water. What's really interesting though is even though we had a lot of new users to the app, we actually had a very similar number of sightings reported as in previous years. So it was helpful to see that was relatively consistent. I'm showing you in these maps, we've got April to May on the top left. You can see mostly the sightings are there from the Potomac River southwards. And then into June and July, they really right up through the bay with a lot of sightings in the upper part of the bay as well as extending down. One thing, I don't know if you noticed, but we generally had in the past much more sightings on the western side of the bay than the eastern, and we were concerned that was that a real pattern that we were seeing in the dolphin habitat use, or was it more about where we had people reporting? So we did try and target more people and groups on the eastern shore to try and get more information to see if there really were more dolphins there or not. And we do have more sightings here. So I think most likely the dolphins are also occurring on the east side. It's just only in this more recent year are we getting more reports of it. As we get into August and then September to October, you can see lower number of sightings in the upper bay and a bit more like April, May. It's mostly from sort of the Potomac and across and southwards as we head into the autumn. And then in the winter, we think they're moving further south. So further south off Virginia and North Carolina, that's where we think these dolphins are spending the winter. So the seasonal occurrence, we've got it colored here by year from 2017 to 2020. And generally we see a very similar pattern each year in that it's got that peak in the summer months. So the sightings really go up very rapidly for June, July, and they start to decrease a bit in August and more in September. Now, obviously, you could also say, oh, well, isn't that sort of really coincides when people are out and about? Is that a real pattern, or is that just when people are out to look for dolphins? So we did have one of our hydrophones in the Potomac River, and interestingly, that, which is recording 24/7, showed a similar pattern. So again, it was having detections of dolphins in May, but it really picked up June, July, August to September, and back down in September. Now, just one of the things to note in terms of how do things vary year to year, you can see these green bars, which are 2018. We seem to have much higher occurrence of dolphins in August than we have done in the other years. And I'll show you in a minute how interesting that was also found in the acoustic data. So it does seem these reports by the public are providing us with very accurate information. So my student, Lauren Rodriguez, she did an analysis looking at the dolphin sightings in relation to environmental conditions, and specifically in relation to temperature, salinity, and tidal phase. And we are really fortunate in the Chesapeake Bay that we have a network of buoys that are collecting environmental data so that we can use that information and then relate it to what the animals are doing. And what she found is that the dolphin sightings in the bay were related to temperature, where we saw more dolphins when there were warmer temperatures, which would make sense. We tend to see them more in the summer. We found they were mainly within salinities of 6 to 22, which means they're not going into the really fresher parts of the bay. And again, that's probably because they're not really feeding on freshwater species. So they seem to be staying more in the salty parts, although they do enter the rivers. And then we also saw higher numbers of sightings during a spring tidal phase. And a spring tidal phase is when you get that higher high tides and lower low tides. So you're getting more of a tidal range and you're getting stronger tidal currents. So it's possible that those conditions are in some way helping them perhaps to find and capture prey. So having trained Lauren's model on our first 2 years of data, which was from June 2017 to May 2019, we then used it to predict dolphin occurrence for a completely separate time period that was not used in the training of the model. It was June to October 2019. So we wanted to see how well does this model do? I mean, they were relatively simple parameters. We just had temperature, salinity, and tidal phase, and they were actually very closely correlated. So this red line that you see on the graph, the number of sightings that were predicted based on the environmental conditions from our model. And then the blue line were the actual number of sightings that we had reported in the app during that time frame. And you can see that they're pretty close. We've got sort of one little blip here where it's out of that green area. The green area is the confidence limits. But mostly we're seeing fairly similar trend, which given how simple this model was, we don't think that the animals are necessarily directly affected by salinity or temperature in the way that fish are, because they are marine mammals. So they are warm-blooded. And so we thought, would they be closely related? But I think temperature partly may be playing both a direct role in having suitable conditions for their young, as well as having an indirect effect in that it's creating conditions when their prey are there. So they're coming into the bay. Now, I mentioned this has all been based, that analysis was all based on our visual sighting reports. Now, I've mentioned that dolphins also make sound. So as well as seeing the dolphins, we can listen to the dolphins. And I'm going to play an audio recording here. And this figure at the bottom here, this is what we call a spectrogram. So it's a way that we visualize the sound. We've got time along the bottom, and then we've got the frequency of the sound on the y-axis here. And we can hear from about 20 hertz right down the bottom here up to about 20 kilohertz. So we can hear much of this range, whereas if I actually put the full range of the dolphin clicks, it would extend all the way up to about 130. So they can hear far higher frequency sounds than we can. These vertical green lines, these are the echolocation clicks. So this is when the dolphin is using its sonar system. It's producing a click and listening to the echo, and that gives its information about the distance to an object, the size of that object, the material of the object. Is it a rock? Is it a fish? And so that's really important for navigating and finding food. And then the whistles, these wiggly green lines, are them talking to each other. Okay, here's the sound. Okay. Did anyone think they heard a click and a whistle? Was it loud enough? Good. Okay, wonderful. So it often takes a bit of time to train your ear to the sounds, but they're producing these sounds really frequently, as say to navigate, feed, and to communicate with each other. So we can listen to these sounds. It's all non-invasive. We're just listening, like hanging a microphone in the water to listen to the sounds they're making. We have hydrophones in the Potomac River, the Patuxent River, the Road River, and across in Eastern Bay near the Miles River. So we can look at these different sites, and here's an example from the Potomac River, where, as I mentioned, we saw a difference between 2018 and the other years. Oh, excuse me. So what we're showing here is we have date along the bottom here on the x-axis, and then the y-axis is the number of hours in a day that we detected dolphins. So obviously this is really going up to 24. We don't really have 25 hours in a day, as much as we might need that extra hour sometimes. But what we see here is in the blue, which is, blue is 2017. We see relatively high occurrence of the dolphins during June and into July, and then it goes down a bit in August and September. But in 2018, we can see that that peak again is in June and July, but it stayed relatively high in August and really didn't decrease that much until October. So 2018 was an unusual year where not only we seem to have a lot of dolphins coming into the bay, but they were staying here longer than in other years. We've also looked at this in relation to feeding buzzes. So this is when the animal is producing those echolocation clicks, but as they approach a fish and they get closer to it, they produce those clicks much more frequently. So it goes from a click, 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 and is that sort of creak noise is what we call a feeding buzz. And it can be as close as 10 milliseconds between clicks. So when we detect that, we know the animal was trying to feed, was hunting. And if we look at that in relation to, on the left graph, we're looking at it in relation to months. So we can see July is when we get the most feeding behavior, where about 45% of the time dolphins are there, we're detecting feeding buzzes, as opposed to in the autumn, where it's more closer to about 30% of the time. We then looked at it in terms of the time of day. So we've got from midnight as 0 and noon as 12, but we didn't see as much of a pattern in the foraging behavior in relation to time of day. But one of the things we want to look at next is in relation to tidal state. So do we potentially see more foraging, for example, when it's a flood tide, when the tide is coming in versus when it's going out? That's something we want to look at next. Now, the whistles that I mentioned, there is one particular type of whistle that's really been of interest to us, and it's called signature whistles. And these are like dolphin names. So within the first year of a dolphin's life, it will develop its own signature whistle. So unlike us, where we name our children, dolphin calves get to pick their own name. And we can identify those names based on the shape, what we call the contour, on one of those spectrogram plots. So here I'm just showing an example where you might have a particular shape of whistle for one dolphin, and you might have a very different shape of whistle for another dolphin. And that allows us to identify that dolphin and track that individual dolphin. And of course, for them, since they're socializing, they're mixing with lots of different dolphins, it's sort of their way of calling out their identity. So when they meet a new dolphin or they're meeting another dolphin at sea, they'll produce their signature whistle. So it helps to maintain that group cohesion. I'm going to play a video here, check my sounds up. So this is an example of a signature whistle. And one of the characteristics that enable us to identify it as a signature whistle is it's repeated in what we call a bout. So we've got these 3 repeated whistles that you can see, they all look like the same pattern. So we identify that as a signature whistle. And then we can use that information for when we detect that whistle again to know, okay, so we saw dolphin flipper, we detected it in July, and then we detected it again in August. So we can develop a time series to see when we're detecting these different dolphins. And so far, we've been able to identify 21 individual dolphins from a hydrophone in the Road River. We've identified over 300 in the Potomac River, and we've identified over 1,500 off the coast of Maryland in the Atlantic Ocean. So in this map here, we've got these sites. The yellow area is the proposed wind energy area where the turbines would be sited. So we've got within that area and beside it, so about 15 to 30 kilometers offshore. And then we've got the site up to the north here. This is in the Road River, and then we've got the Potomac River. We think that the numbers that we have for the Road River and the Potomac are a great underestimate of the actual number of dolphins. Our hydrophone in the Road River was very shallow, so we had a lot of background noise that made it difficult to hear the dolphin whistles. And in the Potomac, we know from a collaboration with Janet Mann's team at Georgetown University that they have managed to ID over 1,000 dolphins from looking at marks on their dorsal fins. So we know there are a lot of dolphins coming into the Chesapeake Bay. One of the things we've also looked at from our signature whistles is, do we detect the same dolphins again? And excitingly, the answer is yes. So the same dolphin, if you saw dolphins in one year and you see them again another year, you may well be seeing some of the same dolphins. So for example, on this plot, these are 142 different individuals that we have detected their signature whistle more than once. So for example, if you look at these dots in the blue and green, on the left, this is indicating they were first detected in about June or July 2017. And then where you see the next dot is when they were detected again. So in many cases, that was July of the next year. So a year later, we were detecting them coming back to the same location. Now, we've been focusing very much on sightings and acoustic data from bottlenose dolphins, but to really understand what they're feeding on, we're now also going to be taking water samples so we can analyze it for environmental DNA. So this is when, just like, I don't know if you've been at home a lot, I've been finding there's a lot more dust in my house. So various things, little hairs and other things that come off the animals end up in the water, and then we can use that to actually find their DNA and identify the species that were present. So it's really nice because it's non-invasive and we can look at multiple species at once, see which species were present. So we're really interested to find out what other species co-occur with the dolphins. So what might be potential prey species? Are they always around where there's striped bass? Or are they always around where there's spot or croaker? Or is it that it just happens to be lots of different species? We know they're generalist feeders, so maybe they don't have a favorite food. So this is work that's going to be starting this summer. In fact, my students are going to start taking water samples next week, and we're looking forward to finding out about those results later in the year. So just to summarize, so bottlenose dolphins have been seen throughout the Chesapeake Bay, and generally they're seen most frequently during the summer months. The acoustic data has really been helping to improve our understanding of bottlenose dolphin occurrence and behavior. If you've enjoyed hearing about the project, please do follow us on Facebook and Twitter, where we put updates regularly about our work. If you are interested in participating, please do download the app if you haven't already. And if you see dolphins, please do report them. We really appreciate everybody's help in collecting and compiling this sighting database. We will be collecting water samples and recording dolphins with a hydrophone, and we're interested in having volunteers participate in that. The water samples for the kits cost about $50 each for the eDNA. So if that's something you're interested in contributing, that would be a huge help. And you can also buy relatively inexpensive hydrophones now. In fact, there's a boat tour company in the lower bay off Cape Charles. They've been using a hydrophone to record dolphin sounds, which they've been sending to us. So for a couple of $100, if you want to be able to hear some more of those clicks and whistles, that's now possible. As I said, the responsible marine life viewing guidelines say this is a protected species, and NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the guidelines we have in the app are based on those. And if you do see a stranded animal, please call these numbers, not us. We do not man our phones or email 24/7. So we cannot respond to a stranding like these teams can. And we have just compiled a summary of the information from our 2020 sightings. So if you go to the UMCES.edu/DolphinWatch webpage, you'll see new for 2021. It says, click here for the 2-page summary. Click on that and you can find our latest results and what our students are working on. So thank you to all of you, Chesapeake DolphinWatch users. Thank you to all of our donors. And thank you very much for listening tonight.
Well, and thank you, Helen. That was fantastic. We really enjoyed that. We have some time for some Q&A. I'm sure there are probably a lot of questions. Let's go ahead and show our appreciation as we can over the Zoom with its limitations. I guess because there are over 40 people attending, I'm going to ask you to put your questions in the chat box and I will read them. Perhaps later we can, after we go through a few, we can kind of open it up to let people speak up for themselves. But for the moment, go ahead and click on the chat box and type in your question there, and I'll try to get to it. While we're waiting for the first questions to come in, Helen, can you explain a little bit about what sorts of challenges and risks there are for conservation of these dolphins, both in the area of the bay and beyond?
Yeah, so these bottlenose dolphins are considered depleted. Unfortunately, there were large mortality events during the 2000s, particularly off Maryland, Virginia, Delaware, and this was caused by a morbillivirus epidemic. So the population did get reduced because of that epidemic and is now hopefully recovering, but it is considered depleted. So we are trying to make sure we're obviously minimizing any other threats. The main threats are bycatch and fishing gear. They do sometimes get caught in gill nets and other fishing gear, so that's a concern. They are very sensitive to sound, so if there's any sort of construction noise here in the bay or elsewhere, that can disturb them. It can mean that they avoid that habitat or even could cause harm and injury because they are very sensitive to sound. Also, we want to obviously have clean water if we can. They're in that water environment. We do see, or we did see when I was in Scotland, a number of skin diseases on the animals. And there I was in the Highlands of Scotland, where very small communities, and they had raw sewage going into the water. And of course, all the disease and stuff that's going in that water, that was also causing these unfortunate skin patches on the dolphins. So there are a number of threats that hopefully this information can help with, knowing that they come into the bay, where they are. So prior to this project, NOAA did not require, if a developer was going to build a new bridge, do some sort of construction noise, there wasn't a consideration of bottlenose dolphins because they weren't considered regular inhabitants of the bay. And now, as we now have this information, they are now considering them. So if there is an activity that could be harmful to the dolphins, they will require the developer to have a mitigation plan.
There is a question about pollution issues, which I think you've mostly covered, but is there a particular concern about harmful algal blooms or any other pollution issues specifically?
Yeah, I mean, they're not as directly affected by the environment in a sense like some of the fish, but they still are ingesting water and fish, and they are top predators. So obviously they are, if you've got something that biomagnifies, bioaccumulates through the food chain, then they can suffer from that, like heavy metals and things like that. Because being at the top of the food chain, it accumulates and that can cause harm and reproduction issues. So that's not good for the dolphins. I mean, obviously we're trying to have cleaner and cleaner water in the bay, and mostly the dolphins here look pretty good. You'll occasionally see markings on their fin, and that can be caused by things that they're getting out in the ocean as well. But yeah, we do occasionally see them with marks on, but mostly they've been fairly clean.
Would you care to hazard a guess as to how many total dolphins there are in the bay?
So, I mean, certainly we think there's over 1,000. Say Janet Mann's team and Emery Jacoby, she's been doing photo ID. They've been doing that for several years now. So they have identified over 1,000 dolphins, individual dolphins in the bay. We think it's actually a combination of different populations that come into the bay that also make us wonder if our definition of what's population might not be quite accurate, because some of them seem to be coming from the North Carolina estuaries and some of them seem to be coming from the coastal populations of dolphins. So we're getting quite a mix of animals coming into the bay, and we know they're breeding here too. So the defined populations may not be as separate as we previously thought. There might be a lot more interaction between the coastal population and the North Carolina estuarine population than we previously realized.
So in theory, could you actually potentially identify each individual dolphin according to their, their call or what you've been calling their name, or somehow give them a numerical identifier?
Yeah, I mean, they've been doing, this has been a traditional method for bottlenose dolphins to use the fin markings, the photo ID, for quite a long time. But using signature whistles is a much newer method. So at the moment, we still have relatively little information on how often they produce signature whistles when they're at sea. Most of the work on signature whistles has been done in captivity. So we're still learning a lot about when and who produces their calls, and we're trying right now in collaboration to see if we can tie this in with the sighting. So for example, if someone sees 10 dolphins, do we detect 10 signature whistles? But yes, ideally, ultimately, we'll record signature whistles from all the individuals and have a catalog of those.
We have a question from 8-year-old Carolina. How long do dolphins stay with their mothers before they go on their own?
Yeah, I mean, so they can take a few years to be weaned. So they will stay very close to their mother for the first 3 or 4 years. But often, particularly the females, may stay with their mothers for much, much longer. And in fact, if a female has a particular place she likes to go to feed, then her young, even when they grow up, will often go to similar places. The males often leave their mothers a bit sooner, and they might go off and either go off with other males or other groups. And there's we call them fission fusion societies. So usually what happens is there's a few dolphins that often hang out together, but then there's other dolphins that they'll mix with at other times too. So it's not like with killer whales where there's a fixed pod. They will mix with other animals as well, but generally the calves will stay with their mothers for at least the first 3 years.
And how are they affected by big storms and rough seas and other extreme weather?
So we actually, that's very hard to study because certainly visual observation is very difficult to do under those conditions. From the acoustics perspective, we looked at that offshore, off Ocean City, and found that during the storm, they did not stay as long in the area. So whether they're searching for food and it's harder to find, we know that fish often hunker down during storms, so maybe the dolphins are just being a bit more mobile. But then after the storm, they were feeding much more frequently. So whether the fish had been disoriented or in some way disturbed and went back to their normal behavior, and then the dolphins are gobbling them all up. So yeah, we did see after storms, the dolphins often have a bit of a feeding feast.
Interesting. So our colleague Tom Fisher is asking, is the predominance of dolphin sightings on the western side of the bay related to the freshwater plume going down that side of the bay?
I don't know. I'm hoping, so this year we are having well, we did have it last year as well, but it had some issues. We had the hydrophone in Eastern Bay, and we're deploying that again this year. And then hopefully we're also going to have another hydrophone further south on the eastern side. So I'm still unsure if the smaller number of sightings on the eastern shore is real, or that's just the sighting report. So by having the acoustics, we're hoping we can compare that and see if the east and west are actually more equal than we thought, or if they really are different. If they are different and there really is the predominance of dolphin occurrence on the western side, then yes, it's possible it's the result of the freshwater plume, but I don't know as yet. We will find out.
Mm-hmm. So are most of the sightings of females, or is there any gender difference in the sightings?
We can't usually tell. Males and females, you can differentiate from markings on their belly. But a lot of the time you're not getting to see that part of them unless you get a really great shot as one is leaping in the air. You often can't see it. So it's very hard to tell if they're males or females. So unfortunately, I don't know.
Okay. The next question is, at the Chamberlain on Fort Monroe, Virginia, we have daily sightings. I took the background picture last year from the Chamberlain roof. Question, is the tunnel construction bothering the dolphins? This is from Kathy DeRussi.
I don't know specifically if the tunnel construction is bothering them. I mean, I say we're definitely trying to raise awareness that the dolphins are there and when they're in the area, so that hopefully mitigation can be taken place. So whether they try and avoid activities during those months when dolphins are really common in the area, or whether they can have observers so that activities can be potentially stopped if dolphins are in the area. But I don't know, as I say, in the past, NOAA wasn't requiring any of this for dolphins. So I don't really know yet what effect it might be having on them.
So a related question, do you know yet what the effect of construction of the wind farms or presence of the wind farms after the constructions will likely be on the dolphins?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we don't yet have a commercial scale wind farm off the US. We have the 5 turbines off Block Island and 2 turbines in a demonstrator project off Virginia. The work that I was doing in Scotland was a 2 turbine project, and there was actually relatively low occurrence of dolphins that far offshore where we were, but we did see an effect on harbour porpoises. And they left the area for a short period of time. And that's generally from the studies that have been done, that's usually what's found, that harbour porpoises will leave the area for a short period of time and then they'll return. One of the good things about sound as a pollutant is it's not like a chemical where you put it in the water and then it disperses and it stays in the environment. Once you stop the sound, it's gone. And so that I think is one good thing, that generally we're seeing only short-term effects of wind turbine construction on dolphins.
And the longer term of the presence of the wind farms?
The operational noise of a wind farm is fairly low frequency. Dolphins and porpoises produce higher frequency calls. They're not as sensitive to the really low frequency sounds. So porpoises, in particular in Europe, it's usually more studies on porpoises than dolphins, but porpoises and seals did not seem to be adversely affected by the operation. And in fact, there was evidence that seals were actually feeding around the turbines where there seemed to be increased fish. What we don't know, though, of course, is whales, which are sensitive to low frequency sounds, if the operational noise might bother them.
Okay.
We unfortunately don't know that.
So we have a closely related question from Arthur, who's 4 years old. Why do dolphins talk by squeaking? Yes, squeaking
Yeah,
as
they
opposed to some other
produce a
kind of noise.
variety of noise. Yeah, they make pops, whistles, squeaks. They make all kinds of funny noises. We still don't know what all these different sounds do. We know the clicks are part of this sonar system to allow them to navigate and hunt food. We know that the signature whistles are part of their identity, just like we say our names. They have something called a bray call, which they usually make when they're feeding. We don't know exactly what function it is. It's associated with feeding. We don't know if it's communicating to other dolphins, hey, I found food, or if it's perhaps related to the coordination, or if it's even sort of, sometimes we hear what they call victory squeals, like, woo, I caught something. So there's various different sounds they make, and many of those, unfortunately, we do not yet understand what they're actually saying. But yeah, they certainly have a variety of calls.
I imagine you'll crack the code eventually.
We'll get there. We'll get there. Yep.
So do dolphins go up the Potomac and spawn like the rockfish, or have their calves in the bay? Or do they have their calves in the bay?
Yeah, well, hearing the word spawn and dolphin, usually you don't see those.
Well, I think they're
together.
comparing
Yeah.
it to spawning with rockfish. Do they go up the bay like the rockfish do to spawn, or do they reproduce, to use that word, in the bay?
Yeah. So we've had one live birth sighting. So that's when someone actually saw a calf being born, which is extremely rare. And that was by a PhD student at Duke University in the Potomac River, near the mouth of the river. I mean, it would make sense that they perhaps don't have their calves right in the main stem in the bay where there's a lot of boat traffic. So they may go to slightly shallower water for that. It was fairly close to the shore. But yes, I mean, obviously they're trying to probably be in a relatively safe place while they have their calf, and their calf can swim right away. So I mean, they are, they are mobile right away, and then they may move into the bay. Yes, we do definitely have sightings of calves in the main stem. It's just I'm not sure if they're actually giving birth in the main stem.
Okay, so I have one more so far. Would you ever want people to submit hydrophone recordings for your research?
Yes, absolutely. As I say, there are a couple of different brands now of hydrophones that are only a couple of $100s. They're relatively easy to use. You can listen to so if you see dolphins, you can put it in the water, listen to the sounds they're making. If you do get hydrophones recording, yes, please do submit them. You can actually submit them through the app. You may see if you look, I don't know if there's any this year, but if you look back to last year, if you see a little microphone symbol, that's when when we or someone else has submitted an audio recording. And if you have any trouble, obviously feel free to email us, but we would love to hear your hydrophone recordings.
Okay. Well, that's great. I think that's all the questions. 7:30, and I think we ought to let you and everyone else go to have their dinner and so on. Video we can show you by clapping as best we can here. So thank you so much, and we really enjoyed it, Helen.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming this evening.
And thanks to everybody for joining us. And don't forget, we have another really interesting talk coming up exactly a week from tonight to learn about ticks. Okay, good night, everybody.
Excellent. Thank you very much
Thank
indeed.
you, Helen. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
So much.
Great talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for coming this evening.
Yes. Excellent.